Hello and welcome back to Hidden Gems. My name is Arden Thomas. I'm the Syncom Smalltalk Product Manager. Any questions, comments, suggestions, please send them to athomas@syncom.com. So today we're going to get back to a topic that I really like, which is DomainMaster. And we're going to talk about making some changes to it. We're also going to talk about some philosophy, some computer science philosophy, and we're going to put it into practice. So first, let's review what DomainMaster is. DomainMaster is a framework that supports making some things easier, building applications, and it also encourages and facilitates large-scale reuse and integration. And this is important because a good framework can do a tremendous amount for you. What a good framework will be is a small amount of well-designed and frequently used code. A small amount of code makes it easier to understand, makes it easier to fix and find issues, and when you start to scale up, it really starts to pay off. Less code is, as I've pointed out before, is less code, less to break and less to maintain. Easy to understand. If you like the Pareto principle, this is the 20% of your code where you will get 80% of the value. So let's review some of what DomainMaster does. It holds on to one domain object. That's a really important thing, and we can really leverage and benefit from just one domain object. What if you need more than one? You combined, you build up. So you get a whole lot of value just out of that. So let's take a look at something. If we have a stock app and we get a domain model right here, I can execute that. And okay, it opens up an app and I have it populated, right? And I can also, for that app, I can swap in, just say, hey, your domain is a different stock, and it changes. You say, okay, well, what's going on behind the scenes here? Well, here's the stock app. Here's the window spec. Let's edit that. We have these fields. The aspect is my symbol. So what it says is get my domain, ask it for its symbol, get my domain, ask it for its name, my industry, my sector, my exchange. And that's basically the interface. Okay, what about the code on the instance side here? There isn't any. Okay, basically everything here that you just saw is supported by this framework. So in this case, no code is nothing to break, nothing to maintain, no problems. As long as our frequently used framework code is good, and since we're using it frequently, we can find and fix issues pretty quickly. That's really important. Another thing supported by this framework is having lists. Often you have lists. So let's look at a list. Here's an app with a list. And so you might ask, well, what's the domain? When you select something in the list, that's the domain. And we can have the list showing this view, and we can also have it showing this way. So you can have multiple presentations for the same list. When you select something, that is your domain. And that makes it so, let's see. We'll open that up. We can also support things like, well, what if we just want 3 things in that? Okay, we got the first 3 stocks and hey, that's what you're going to display. And now if I want to go back to the full list because that was temporary, the framework makes it easy to do that. Okay. If we go back to that, let's just open that back up. If I select Apple, I can ask the app for its domain, and I can see I get Apple. So that's what the domain is. Next, let's take a look at integrating apps. So here we have the list app, and when we select that domain is shared with this stock app. And all we really had to do is paint those two applications right here. And you might ask, well, how do we connect them together? And that's basically just done right here. And that's it. Super initialize. We get an instance of our stock list app, and we tell the stock app its domain is from that list. That connects them together. Minimal code, minimal to break, simple and clear. That's the whole intent of this framework. The accessing code is just return the stock app and the stock list app. The actions are some things that we're going to get to a little later in this presentation. Lastly, this also supports modularity. Let's open a list. Now say from that list, we want a stock app whose domain holder is that app, is this right here, whatever we select in this list, but we want it separate, not integrated. So I can do this. This is a separate app, and they're tied together. And again, that's the code to do this right here. And there's multiple ways we can. Let's go back to open this app, and we can say to that app, stock app, open with domain holder app, and it's the same result. Two different ways to express that. So now what do we want to do? Well, let's go back to our stock list stock app right here. And what I really want to do is open up another window with some not directly related. In other words, I can't get the information for this directly from this domain object. It's related, but not directly that domain object. Another problem we sometimes might have is lists make it a little tricky. Say we want to get our list from a domain, so we want to have a list hooked up to something else. But remember, the list itself isn't the domain object. The selection in the list is the domain object. But then what if you want to provide a list from a domain? Well, it gets a little tricky. So how do we fix this? Okay, that's the basic problem. Trivial domain apps are really simple to hook up and make modular, but what happens when you need to make something a little more complex, especially for lists? Well, for philosophy, there's an aphorism by a computer scientist named David Wheeler, and this is one I've known for years. All problems in computer science can be solved by adding a level of indirection. And to me, that's half tongue-in-cheek, but it's also very true. You don't want to just keep doing that, because there's also consequences and pros and cons to adding more and more levels of indirection. But you can definitely solve some problems by adding a level of indirection. So actually, this is what we're going to do. We're going to add a level of indirection and upgrade our DomainMaster. So what do we want to do? Well, we're going to add to DomainMaster. DomainMaster has a domain holder, but we're also going to add domain source. Domain source is optional, and it allows the application. Well, let me back up for one thing. Could I have solved this without adding this level of indirection? Yes, but the solution that I found was not simple. It was not straightforward. So based on that trade-off, it made sense to add this piece. You want to be very careful about adding things like that. You want to add things as infrequently as possible, and only if you really, really need it, if it makes things simpler and straightforward. And part of that is is allowing the app itself to figure things out. So it's where you're putting the information, where you're solving things, and adding domain source allowed me to do this. So domain source is optional, and it allows the application to build its domain holder from the source. So let's take a look at right here. I want to open up another application, and I want that application to go to the financial visualization site and retrieve the data and display it in a list for the selected thing. So in this case, for Honeywell. And here it is. Let's take a look at that. Okay, I have a FinViz data app, and I tell it the domain source is going to be from the list right here. And in fact, if I choose something else, notice my list gets updated. All the values get updated. And it's actually going out to the website, getting a RESTful URL, bringing back the data, parsing that data, and doing this. So how are we doing this? Well, let's take a look. Okay, here's the FinViz data app. It has very little code, but one of the important things for this framework is that the domain source changed. Okay, so if the domain source changes, in other words, I click here, and that changes my domain source, because I've created a dependency on that domain source. When this is set up, the framework does that for me. And so what do? All I need to do is implement domain source changed method in this and tell it what to do. So in this case, I want to build the list. I do that if my domain source's value is nil. So if I have nothing selected, I do nothing. Otherwise, I'll create a FinViz model for the domain source's value. Let's do this. Let's put a breakpoint in right here, and we'll click on something. And that stopped me in my debugger. I can see my domain source. I can get my domain source value. I can inspect that. Okay, it's Boeing. Let's step through the code here. The domain source value, I'm going to create a FinViz model for this. Okay, I get the new symbol, then I tell it to get data. And this actually goes out to the FinViz site, gets the data, parses the data. Okay, now I can ask the FinViz model for its data associations, which, let's check that out, is this. All the information, the title and the value, each one of these is an association. So we have a key and a value that we're going to display in the list. And we just tell the app here, this is a list supported DomainMaster app, DomainMaster list, Domain List Master. We just tell it the list is these things. And in fact, when we do that, let's do that. And when it updates, there it is. All the new values, we have the symbol right up here, and that works as we go through. It goes out for each one of those. So that's how we extended the DomainMaster framework to provide more flexibility and for some standard API, domain source change, so we can simply tell an app, your domain source is this. We could tell it its domain holder, if this is the domain that we want, or if it's more complex, and it can be very complex, we can say, hey, your domain source is this, and then we do things like just implement domain source change, so we know when we click here, this is what we've got to do, or whatever we deem that we're going to do that. And that can be building a domain holder, or it can be building what we need to do for the app. So I hope you enjoyed this. Any questions? If you want any of the code, and this is a work in progress that we've made to DomainMaster, adding domain source. Let's do a quick recap. So you can solve anything by adding a level of indirection, which is true. You want to be careful though. You don't want to just add willy-nilly new levels of indirection, because you can get carried away and then you end up with a non-straightforward mess. We talked about the importance of a good framework, how it can make a lot less code that gets used frequently and provides you tremendous value in making things easier. And I showed you one of the apps actually had no code in it whatsoever. We upgraded. We talked about the upgrade. We talked about why we upgraded. We wanted some more flexibility in hooking up applications with this framework. So we added domain source. Remember, DomainMaster has one domain object. And we can have one domain object that and an interface that shows that object. We can have different interfaces to show that object. And also it supports having lists. When you click in that list, and that list can be a dataset list or a straightforward list. And when we select something, that's our domain object. And then this handles hooking things up fairly fastly. So I hope you enjoyed that. Until next time, have a great time with Smalltalk. Thank you.